Hi, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maggie Schear. I work at Brighthouse, which is part of BCG, a creative consultancy within BCG. And in that work, I work on purpose, culture, and branding, helping companies to articulate why they exist, where they're going, and the kind of culture they need to get there. Which is why I'm really excited about this panel today, which is all about how do you create a culture that delivers on your innovation strategy in a really sustained and successful way. So let me introduce the great minds that I'll be in discussion with on this topic. First, we have Jason Gowans, Senior Vice President and Chief Digital and Technology Officer at Levi, Stauss & Company, a truly iconic consumer brand that is rewiring itself through consumer centricity, digital commerce, and data. And then we have Xingchu Liu, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Genentech, a company that really pioneered the biotech industry with revolutionary breakthroughs in the treatment of cancer, MS, and more. And finally, we have Michael Mina, chef, founder, and executive chairman of Mina Group, an award-winning restaurant management company operating over 30 chef-driven concepts across the US and globally. What I love about this constellation of panelists is that they all come from very different contexts. So we have the highly regulated biotech industry, kind of a consumer fashion brand, a restaurant group, and yet I think we're going to find some real commonalities in how you foster innovation in those various contexts. So before we dive in, I'll just ground us quickly in our topic. Almost every organization says that innovation is a priority, but very few organizations do it well, sustainably, and repeatedly over time. And so what we want to get into today is what kind of culture does it take and how do you create and foster that culture that can create innovation that succeeds, that sustains, and that really scales. So to get us going, I would love if you can each tell us what you see as working best inside of your organization today. So what are the things you're doing to foster a culture of innovation that you're really proud of? Whoever wants to go first. Jason?
For us, it's really about clarity of the strategy first. And, I had a boss once who told me that, the way that he thought about this was this idea of wide boulevards and high curbs, or other people might say freedom within a framework. And for us, it starts with the company strategy. So Michelle, who's our CEO, she came in 3 years ago, same as myself. And one of the first things that she did when she became CEO was to really crystallize and clarify what the company strategy was and what we were going to be focused on, and importantly, what we weren't going to be focused on. And I think once you've got that clarity of strategy, then decision-making becomes a lot easier and the places where you choose to innovate. So I think it starts with just making sure that, A, the leadership team is aligned, and then everybody else is aligned as well.
Yeah, totally agree.
I like your point a lot because I have a similar thought, but maybe in a Genentech way. So as you probably know, that Genentech is the original biotech company. So the innovation is really at the heart of everything we do. And by the way, we are celebrating our 50 years anniversary this year. So talking about innovation, where I think I value the most is really organizational alignment. Because when we think about innovation, it's no longer just a technology innovation. This is really about our talent and new ways of working. The three pieces coming together with organizational alignment, that would enable the speed and the scale. That's where I think it's really the most critical piece as Genentech working together. But at the same time, as we're serving our mission to really bring better outcomes for patients, we have a clear mission as we drive the innovation where we target our effort and prioritize. That's also critical as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Michael?
Well, I think, like you said, there's so many similarities in business, and I think one of the great things about what we do, I always have felt so blessed that I got into an industry, and especially any of you that are from the Bay Area or really almost any city in the United States right now, my industry just happened to explode at the right time. And, the world of the chef, like I remember telling my father when I was 15 that I wanted to be a chef. And that was a very short conversation. It was like, no, you're a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, that's it. And the world has changed so much. And, people are so intrigued by food, and it's become something that the innovative side of it, it's not just limited to people in restaurants anymore. And so what's great about that is now you really have to, like I've always said, like, there's multiple ways you can go in our industry, but really you kind of had to pick. There's really two lanes, especially in a city like San Francisco, where you're in one of the top food cities in the world. You're either going to be a chef that has one restaurant and is building kind of their legacy in that one restaurant. What's happened in the United States, I think that's really been amazing, is over the last 10 to 12 years, maybe 15 years, it used to kind of be voodoo to have more than one restaurant. And so a lot of the people that were quote unquote restaurateurs were not chefs. Chefs have really become now the restaurateurs. And you can see it throughout the country, because now you have great, talented chefs that go work for Thomas Keller at French Laundry and then go to Wisconsin and open a restaurant, and it's a great restaurant in Wisconsin. And I think that has been the really exciting part of kind of our industry right now, is just kind of watching this explosion of innovation that's happening right now. And when we talk about innovation, there's really three things. You innovate through technique, because the techniques you use for cooking, those have to be very innovative. You innovate through creative flavors, and you innovate through presentation. And the really great restaurants will find ways to put a little bit of borders. That's the really important thing, is to put the borders around it. And probably the one thing I say most to people is the best ingredient on the dish is usually the one you leave off. And that's kind of been my story.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a truth that constraint breeds creativity, and you need that editing. So I want to dive in and talk a little bit about structure and culture. So I think about structure as really the systems, the incentives, the way you design the organization to foster innovation. And this is particularly critical because in a lot of companies, especially big established companies, the design is in place to actually mitigate risk, right, or reduce risk. And what we're trying to do is go actively seek risk and find it. And so we have to design structure inside the culture to create that and to foster that. So I would love to know, how have you created structure in all of your very different contexts that foster an innovative culture? Whether that's the incentives or the way you have structured innovation, where you put it in the organization, timelines, metrics, et cetera.
I'll start.
We're looking at you.
When I joined Levi's, one of the first things that we were doing was we were diagnosing what was going on with Levi.com. And by now, half of our business is direct to consumer, and online is a large part of that. And yet there was still lots of opportunity. And one of my early days there, I was talking with the person who ran experimentation, who ran A/B testing on the site and in the app. And they were really proud to tell me that the win rate on the site was 60%. And I had come from a place where the win rate was probably like 12 or 15%. And I realized in that moment that we had just a fundamental difference on what success looked like. For me, success is shots on goal. Success is learning. Success is a hypothesis. Success is moving fast. For them, at that moment, at least, success was, I did this thing. I had a high degree of certainty it was going to work, and sure enough, it worked. And so from that moment, it really became clear that we needed to start from first principles. Like, what are the operating principles of our team through which we're going to make decisions? And when we talk about risk, a lot of times as a leader, sometimes it can mask kind of some of this lack of clarity on what the operating principles are, the contract between you and me on how we're going to work. So as an example, one of the things that we focused on in those operating principles within my team and the folks that I support is this idea of making good decisions. And so sometimes it can come from a lack of trust. I'm not confident you're going to make a good decision. Right. But decision making is a skill that can be taught, it can be learned, it can be practiced. Concepts like we're going to de-average this problem, we're going to explore opportunity at both ends of the distribution. Now we're starting to talk about the same language. So for me, it was very much what are the operating principles by which we are all going to function starting there.
Yeah, I love that, and getting that formalized so people can align around it. That's fantastic. Xingchu?
Because Genentech is also working in the healthcare industry, there's a lot of regulations, but also what we deliver to the patients ultimately, this is a matter for lives and quality. So it's critical to have the very robust process to ensure safety, compliance and reliability. But at the same time, that's where when we think about the innovation in terms of structure, it's no longer just one team driving innovation. We need to leverage the cross-functional teams to bring the expertise together. But to do that, the speed really matters, because every day it is about how we can help patients faster, really helping them to have better quality of life. That means to reimagine how we work for each team. For example, last year we really focused on one part is about generating the right content and information for physicians and patients. And as we all heard about, the AI accelerating the drug discovery, there are more targeted treatment for patients. It's becoming overwhelming. So we need to have very specific content to communicate and share with patients and physicians. That puts a really high demand for the velocity, the quality, and accuracy. In the past, this is going to take the team months because the careful evaluation process approval. But then as we're introducing the AI, introducing the innovation through the end-to-end process, that's where C is coming back to weeks. So that means we can really get to the patients at the time they need. So that's one example, thinking about the structure as a cross-functional. The other example, also, we start introducing more of conversational AI to facilitate in terms of supporting the patients on call, supporting our people, engaging with the physicians. Through that conversations, again, there's so much overwhelming information. But as we're introducing the conversational AI to facilitate, but also synthesize, that's where we see huge time savings, but also much more engaging conversations. That's where we're just so pleased and see the impact. But again, this is not only about the technology, but also cross-functional team and adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael?
I'd say there's probably three to four major flaws that I saw early on in our industry when it really came to how you're going to innovate. And flaw number one was, I think that our industry had a stigma of, you're going to go peel carrots for 6 months before I'll give you the recipe for a carrot soup, right? And to me, that made no common sense at all, because to me it was, everyone would hide transparency as like this way that people aren't going to quit working for you because they want that recipe for carrot soup. So we wanted to shatter that from day one. And we were also blessed because we were in a city where technology was exploding. And so 17 years ago, we created something, and it was called Recipe Exchange. It was completely industry changing because every recipe, every dish, every ingredient, every list that you could imagine the day you started, it was all digital, and everyone got it. And everyone said, you're crazy. You're going to give away all your recipes. You're going to do all this from day one. And so I think what we did is we eliminated that whole thought process of you don't have the tools, you don't have the transparency that you need. And we built it in a way in which you could contribute. So like, we could all three be working on a recipe together, a dish together, an idea together, and input different things throughout the company. And so the other thing it did for us was, with about 1,500 employees at that time, everyone's looking at everyone's work. So people were kind of, you have to think twice about doing something you haven't put a lot of thought into, because everyone's looking at each other's work. But I think that that helped us. It helped us tremendously in starting this idea of that, you there is no reason to not give everyone complete transparency of everything, because they're going to work. People are going to give you so much more when they're, no matter what you can compensate them for in a salary. It's all about learning, and especially when you're young in our industry and you're trying to work your way up. And so I think from there, what we really found was, as we started to scale, this kind of became our platform. But then we said, well, what do we need really? Because we have the really creative people that are, whether they're in culinary, whether they're in beverage, whether they're in service, but then even in finance and everything else, now that we had this platform that had pictures of lobster pot pies and all this, we actually really combined it with the numbers. And so even when people were looking at financials and everything else, we want you to remember you're in our industry, you're in the restaurant industry. This is what matters. It's not just the numbers. The numbers matter. Everything, all of it matters. And so it kind of, I think, helped everybody to understand this is the vision. And then lastly, it was the model. So the traditional restaurant model was, to do this was not cheap. So the traditional restaurant model was, you go out, you raise money to build one restaurant. You kind of just work for somebody still, even though you're quote unquote an owner. We took the model we looked at the Four Seasons model, and early on said, we are going to be a management company, and so we're going to go partner with these great hotels and casinos, and we're going to build these showcase restaurants, but all of our money will go into the infrastructure of building people and systems that you wouldn't have with a normal restaurant. And those three things together kind of gave us that initial lift to where everybody really kind of got to focus on what they were good at, but with one vision.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. So we talked about the structure side of culture, and I'll add kind of an interesting point. There's a book by Safi Bahcall, a physicist, which is about this question of how do you structure for innovation, and he identifies, companies have loon shots, which are ideas which are like fragile in their early stage, but transformative long term. And then you have franchises, which are your stable money makers. And that companies tend to protect their franchises and kill their loon shots, even though that's not what they actually wanted to do or meant to do. And so you have to structure. And I think some of you have shared examples of ways you've structured to try to protect those early ideas and then bring them ultimately to franchise, whether it's the way you incentivize or where you put it in the organization or the operating principles that make sure you agree, how are we going to make smart decisions about risk? So, but there's another side of culture, right? So there's the sort of structure side, but there's also the story side or the software that goes on the hardware, which is, because fundamentally we are meaning-making, storytelling creatures as humans. And some of the decisions we make about how to behave inside an organization are rational responses to incentives, and some of them are also driven by the social cultural context in which we're operating. And in my work, I think a lot about how do you shape that sociocultural context to get the behaviors you want. And narrative is really kind of the lingua franca of human social groups, right? It's how we form our heuristics and our mental maps and understand norms. And so the stories we tell as leaders actually matter a great deal. And so I would love to hear from each of you reflecting on this, when you think about how you handle successes, how you talk about failure, how you link innovation to the company's purpose or mission, or you talked about a really clear strategy, right? How you tell that story. And sometimes we say it in the work that I do, culture is who you make heroes of, right? It's about what you lift up and celebrate. And so talk to us a little bit about that sort of softer side of building culture inside your organization.
We seem to be going
We're
left
going
to right,
this way, so
so
let's
keep
keep it
going. Before I joined Levi's, company had the foresight to have this machine learning AI bootcamp, and it was an 8-week immersive program. And the folks that could actually participate in it included people from the stores. And for us, we've got 3,200 stores around the world, more than 1,100 company owned. So it's a big endeavor. One of the folks that participated in that boot camp was this guy called Michael Buchanan. He'd been in the stores for almost 20 years, different jobs, but obviously an expert in the stores. Went through the boot camp for 8 weeks, and at the end of it, not everybody, but at the end of it, he ended up taking a job on the AI team at Levi's at corporate, and completely different job than he'd been doing before. And last year, we had a hackathon on. At that time, it was our first AI hackathon. We'd been doing AI for a while, but AI hackathon, and one of the agents that he built was this thing that he called Stitch. And Stitch is predicated on a really simple idea, which is when you're a stylist in the store, he wanted to eliminate the amount of times that you ever said, I don't know. I don't know what my time off policy is. I don't know how to ship a buy online, pick up in store order. I don't know what the difference is between a 501 and a 502. I don't know. His goal was to eliminate that. So he built this agent called Stitch. And we rolled it out to the store. We tested it in the stores. It was obviously successful. We actually just found recently that the stores in which we did the initial test, customer satisfaction was 8 points higher in those stores than the rest of the fleet. So we've obviously rolled it out to all the other stores. But you talk about stories. It's those kinds of stories that you celebrate, because innovation is not this thing that it's me or Michelle, the CEO, that's driving down into the company.
Right.
It's examples like this multiplied all over the place. And so, it's those sort of things that really power innovation.
Yeah, I love that. That's an incredible story.
I think that's just where it's like you feel it's so real, right? It's like, oh, this can be me or my peers and friends. For us, I love that point, and I think just building upon that, we're also thinking about the innovation, as I mentioned earlier, cross-functional, but also recognizing the innovation is also changing how in the healthcare industry, the physician and the patient's expectation, how they'd like to be engaged, how they'd like to influence the decision as well. In that sense, for us, it's no longer just Genentech figure out all the innovation. We actively partner across broader industry to deliver the best, because at the end is about serving the patients.
Right.
So one example last year, what we did was we have the flu medicine, which has just one pill can really reduce symptom, but also preventing you from infecting your family members. So it's huge, impactful. But getting that to the patient's hands within 48 hours, that has been always the challenge. Number one, you don't necessarily know where the medicines are available in your local region. Second, even how you get the prescription and delivery or pick it up. That's where our team really innovated in terms of how we partner cross industry, find the best partners. How do we deliver with that accuracy, with that quality? And then internally, we spin up the digital front doors for our patients to find where the medicine is available quickly. So it really takes that kind of stitching all the pieces together to define what the innovation is. But at the end, it's all about serving the patients with that speed.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great story.
Ours is kind of interesting because, again, I would say that our industry has changed so much over the last, 3 or 4 decades. And so really knowing, early on, I didn't really understand, what was the target, what was really, what would it mean to be successful in this industry? Now it's crystal clear. To be relevant decade after decade in this industry is really, really hard, because it is a lot like a musician or an actor now, because of where our industry has kind of gone and how much it's, whether it's social media, whether it's, there's just so many different ways of, getting yourself out there and things of that nature. And so a few years ago, we decided that we were going to kind of blow up the whole idea of what's called marketing, and everything was, marketing, PR, this. And it was very hard for us to get our head around it, and there was so much, it almost felt like there was so much noise around it. And so we put together a really best-of-class team where we were able to bring back some people that were in operations with us, and we put together a team and just simplified it, and we called it relevance and revenue. And we said, these are the only two things we need. Like, if we're gonna last decade after decade, now everyone has to contribute because I'm just getting older. So I need, all the brilliant young people that know what's relevant today are contributing in relevance. And, with us, it's a race to the bottom if you're trying to just cut your costs to survive. So you have to be able to create relevant items, relevant things to be able to raise your revenue, to be able to continue to innovate.
Yeah. I love that relevance revenue. You give people something they can latch onto and understand a kind of language for the organization. It's powerful. I want to talk about bringing innovations from pilot to scale, because it's one thing to experiment well, but it's another thing to move to execution. So what determines whether an innovation becomes real impact, and what are the biggest pitfalls on that journey from idea to execution? Is that 0?
It says 0.
I can't see the
But
clock.
we can
I can't
go
see
on,
the
I
clock,
reckon.
which is a fundamental flaw. Okay, well then, let's wrap it up. Rapid fire, 1 sentence each. One hard truth leaders must accept if they want innovation to thrive.
It feels uncomfortable before it's successful.
Yeah. Fair.
Leaders don't know all the answers, especially in this AI world. So it's really about empowering the team to drive innovation.
Love that.
Leaders have one major responsibility. Don't let people skip the steps that it's going to take to get them to be able to do their best work, because their best work is always going to be better than your best work, because you have more of them, and if they follow the steps, you can easily back off and say, oh, don't worry about following these steps, just bring it here.
Right.
But it's not going to be their best work.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. All three of you have great stories and insights, and appreciate you bringing them and sharing them. So it was lovely to talk through it with you. So thank you, and thank you all for coming.